Today we begin a brand new series called Digital Detox. I have some questions. If you wanted to invent a device that could literally rewire a person's mind by introducing physiological changes to that person's brain, what would that device look like? If you wanted to invent a device that could keep a whole group of people constantly distracted, feeling alone and isolated, and always on the brink of exhaustion, what would that device look like? If you wanted to invent a device that destroyed a person's ability to focus for more than a few seconds, in church or anywhere else, or to think and ponder deeply about something, what would that device look like? If you wanted to invent a device that would help people feel less empathy for others while becoming more absorbed with their own selves, what do you suppose that device would look like? And if you wanted to invent a device that reimagined the rules of social etiquette or remove the need to practice general kindness and politeness toward others, what do you suppose that device would look like? Would it look something like this? I didn't ask our tech team, but I am going to, or give them any heads up, I'm going to ask you in just a moment to black out the room. Is that possible? I don't know if you know this, but it is the job of the lead pastor sometimes to annoy the tech team. So I want, if you wouldn't mind, can you grab your phone? Just grab your phone. I know you all have it, except for Donna Eldridge, because the Lord told her not to bring her phone to church today. So God bless her for that. Donna, you're exempt from this little exercise. Everybody, can you just grab your phone? Do me a favor, turn on your flashlight. Turn on your flashlight. Do we have any young people here in case any of the older people don't know how to turn on their flashlights? All right. All right, so turn on your flashlight. I'm going to ask you some questions, and what we're going to do is we're just going to signal whether or not this applies to us by raising our phone and our flashlights, all right? You get it? All right, so let's black out the room. All right, raise your phones if you remember life before the smartphone. I don't know if this looks as cool to you as it does to me, but raise your phones if you have only ever been in a world that has the smartphone. All right. Raise your phones if you always have your phone in silent mode so that it never rings out loud like a telephone. Nice. Raise your phones if you have ever used your phone while watching TV. Raise your phone if you have ever spent more time watching your kid's performance or sporting event through the screen because you were recording it instead of watching it in real life. Raise your phones if you have ever taken it into the bathroom. Raise your phones if your family has ever called search and rescue while you were in the bathroom. Raise your phones if you have ever yelled at your phone because something was taking too long to download. Raise your phones if you have ever misplaced your phone and it created more anxiety in you than if your kid disappeared for a second. Raise your phone if you would be lost while traveling if all you could use was a paper map. Raise your phone if you wouldn't know where to find or purchase a paper map. Raise your phone if you have ever had to seek any kind of medical help for pain or an injury related to the use of your digital devices, phones, computers, tablets. And then finally, raise your phones if you have ever given your phone a rice bath and prayed the most passionate and earnest prayer of your life. Thank you. We can turn the lights back on. So we have an anchor verse that I would like for us to look at this morning, Psalm 119 and verse 37. I would encourage you to consider memorizing this verse and taking it with you. It reads, "Turn my eyes from worthless things and give me life through your word." Turn my eyes from worthless things and give me life through your word. You know, I think it would probably be good for us right here at the outset to all read this out loud together. Can we do that? Turn my eyes from worthless things and give me life through your word. This, what the psalmist here is appealing to God regarding is to keep his eyes from what is worthless. This word speaks specifically of worthlessness, things that are they're just vanity, they're empty, they're falsehoods and lies. They are wasted actions that bring no result. These worthless things are the kinds of things we engage in that don't actually result in anything productive. I think I could almost say we all, but I'll stop short of that. I imagine most of us have to face a drug problem, an addiction problem, and that drug problem, that addiction problem is around the area of content. It is, with a capital C, content that has captured our attention. There is content that we are constantly inundated with, that we find attractive. Like, part of the challenge of actually engaging with the content is that it's not the kind of content that we can easily dismiss. The reality is, it's attractive to us. There's content that will catch our interest. It'll lure us into its world. And then it casts its spell with all of its enchantments. Many of you have experienced what it's like to get that dopamine hit. And then that dopamine hit after dopamine hit, until our addiction manifests in repeated behavior, which is what the content creators have designed for us. We like to think that we're in control, that we could stop anytime. Does this sound anything like the drug and addiction problems that you've heard about in other areas? But the reality is, any drug counselor would look us straight in the eyes and tell us, you're hooked. We have an addiction problem. And it may not have to do with some kind of chemical that we put into our bodies that has a physiological effect on our state of mind. But it is an addiction problem in that the content that we find ourselves constantly engaging with can produce in us addiction-style behaviors. And so again, I just go to the appeal of the psalmist who cries out to God and says, God, keep my eyes from worthless things and let me experience life by your word. Our text this morning is going to come from John chapter 10. And so if you have your Bibles, you can turn to John 10, or you can turn your digital devices to the same, if that is all that you brought with you. John chapter 10, and let's stand together as we hear God's word this morning. John 10, verse 1, this is Jesus speaking. He says, truly I tell you, anyone who doesn't enter the sheep pen by the gate, but climbs in some other way is a thief and a robber. And the one who enters by the gate is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens it for him, and the sheep hear his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. When he has brought all his own outside, he goes ahead of them. The sheep follow him because they know his voice. They will never follow a stranger. Instead, they will run away from him because they don't know the voice of strangers. Jesus gave them this figure of speech, but they did not understand what he was telling them. And so Jesus said again, "Truly, I tell you, I am the gate for the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep didn't listen to them. I am the gate. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. A thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come so that they may have life and have it in abundance." Thank you. You may be seated. So Jesus uses this analogy and speaks of this one who, because he is a thief and a robber, comes in to the sheepfold in, quote, some other way. I mean, just think about the imagery, the contrast between one who comes through the main gate and then one who alternatively tries to sneak in some other way. Which do you suppose likely has evil intentions? Jesus talks about the sheep and the reality that the sheep know the voice of the shepherd, so much so that the shepherd can come in and call out to his sheep and they will follow him outside wherever he goes. I think there's an interesting thing for us to understand about our digital lives, and that is that we will do things in the digital world that we would never do in real life. We follow things in the digital world that we would never follow in real life. We say things in the digital world that we would never probably say in real life. Imagine years ago, you had a conflict with somebody else. And this was even prior to the invention of the telephone. And so the only way you had of getting a message to this person to whom you wanted to hurl some particular insult was through the telegram. And we all live here in the Northeast. And just imagine somebody has so offended you in the month of February. And so the only way that you could let this person know what you thought of them, the only way that you could speak your mind was, well, it's February, so you got to bundle up in all your winter clothes and put on your best boots, wrap yourself in a scarf and get your hat and your gloves. And then, there's no cars or anything, so you got to walk down to the general store, and the wind is whipping, and the snow is just a driving force. And you walk into the general store, and then try doing this without sounding petty. You got to tell that person who's ready to receive your telegram message the words that you want to use to communicate to this person you have a beef with. I don't know what those words are, but let's just say it's something like, hey, I want you to tell this person, here it is, you're a jerk, full stop. And that telegram operator, he's just kind of, okay, and he writes down the message, and you say, read that back to me. And he says, you're a jerk. That's perfect. And then you pay that person, right? It's not even free. You've got to pay that person to then send the telegram. We'd never do something like that. And think about how digital technology has given us the ability to access the attention of another person with barely any effort or forethought whatsoever. How easy it is for us to respond in kind to what somebody else perhaps has done or said in the digital world. You see, what we've experienced is that the digital world has stripped away the normal boundaries that once protected us. Again, Jesus gives this imagery of the sheep who are protected inside the boundaries and the confines of the sheepfold. They are protected from outside dangers, right? Because of the boundaries around them and those who are looking out for their best interests. But the digital world has stripped away those boundaries. It has torn down all of those natural walls. It has removed us from the benefit of things like space and time, which at one point used to protect us. How many of you know that when you got yourself a little ruffled up because of something that happened, you could sometimes deal with it by getting a little bit of space? Just removing yourself geographically from the conflict that was occurring in your presence. You just walk off. Just needed a little space. Or how many of you experienced the healing balm of time? Right? Like, how many of you have ever done the opposite, where you didn't let time provide any kind of benefit? You just reacted in the moment and then inevitably regretted that reaction. You see, the boundaries that naturally exist and provide us some protections when it comes to the way we interact with one another are actually really good and healthy things. It's almost as if God, when he created humankind, he thought to himself, I imagine every once in a while a conflict is going to occur between my beloved and among my beloved humans. What shall I do? Oh, I think I shall grant them the boundaries and the protections of things like space and time. So Jesus describes this enemy as one who sort of sneaks over the wall in order to do harm to the sheep. But it isn't always obviously evil and wicked things that enemy is going to introduce to the sheep. When we find the boundaries of our lives being obliterated, we can find, and many of you have experienced this, where something like our work life bleeds into our life. How many of you have experienced that? Like, there used to be, for most of humanity, a boundary that existed between their work life and their life. Right? For a lot of people, it was, whatever that thing is that you went out of your home to do or to accomplish or to produce, a time came where you punched the clock, that was the end of the workday, and you made your way back home, and that was it. There was no boss calling you. There were no customers who were emailing you. There was no just continual onslaught of the outside world invading your private space. You were free, at least for a part or a portion of the day, to experience the wonderful bliss and the sanctity of private life. But that boundary has, for most of us, largely been eroded. And now we find our work life constantly bleeding into our life. And that's why it can be pretty much any hour of the day, right up until the time when we go to bed, sometimes even after we have laid ourselves to sleep and closed our eyes and called an end to the day, and then bing, the phone goes off. And we are again just ushered right back into the throes of the grind. We're always on. This is how we find ourselves today. We're always on. We're always available. And with that, we also find ourselves always in the crosshairs of others. Because we are so accessible, there's literally no time when I am not available for somebody to aim their digital target at wherever I happen to be and doing whatever I happen to be doing and take a shot. So the boundaries are gone, but what about this robber, this thief? What do they want? What is it that they're trying to get? What is it that's motivating them? Well, what we have found, what we have discovered, what we are growing more aware of is the fact that they want our attention. Like when it comes to the digital and the media world, what they want is our attention. And the reason is because attention equals cash. Every time my eyeballs are on a screen, every time your eyeballs are on a screen, somebody's making money. Somebody is cashing in on our attention. Whether we find ourselves looking, scrolling, clicking, or pressing, they've got our attention. And the problem with surrendering our attention to one thing, like a screen, is that it inevitably means we must not pay attention to something else. Right? As much as we like to think how broad we can share our attention, how many different directions our attention can be going at one time because we are such high-functioning individuals. The reality is, and what we have scientifically discovered is, our attention can really only be on one thing. And when that one thing happens to be a digital screen, then our attention is diverted from everything else. Sometimes that everything else looks like people. Sometimes it looks like people that we're sharing space with. How many of you, this would have been a good one for us to raise our lights, how many of you have ever texted somebody in your own home? How many of you ever texted somebody who's sitting in the same room as you are, right? So the problem with surrendering our attention is the reality that now our attention has been diverted from something else, probably something that is more important than whatever we happen to be focusing on the screen. And here's what I think is true about us. In the real world, we would never have given those who are trying to make profit off of our attention, we would never give them that much attention. Right? Like if they came through the front gate and if they made completely clear what is their aim and what is their goal and what is their strategy, and the reality that the product is not something that we think we're purchasing online, but rather the product has now become you and me, to the degree that we actually understood that, we would resist giving away our attention for such a cheap price. This is why the thief doesn't come in the front gate. They climb in some other way. And so here's what's happening when we are engaged in the digital world. They out there, they're watching. They're watching our digital and they're watching our online activity. Everything that we do is being tracked. Everything that we do leaves a digital trace. There are breadcrumbs that we are leaving behind us everywhere we go. And the more we scroll, the more we engage, the more information is created about us. Right? Those who are out there are learning more about what it is that makes you tick, what it is that you find attractive, what it is that you think is hilarious, what you think is cute. And then that information doesn't just reside in some digital storage space somewhere. No, it gets sold. It gets sold to other people. And then those who buy that information, they employ tactics to further engage and capture and arrest our attention. How many of you have ever heard of the variable ratio schedule? Anybody ever heard of that? Where are my derelict gamblers in the room? No, nobody wants to admit to that. This is a tactic. The variable ratio schedule is the technology that's used in things like slot machines. So you go to the casino, right? And you see how people are almost possessed with constantly, I don't know if they still pull things or push things or whatever, but constantly refreshing, right? Constantly engaging that slot machine. And that slot machine is running according to a variable ratio schedule. What the design or what the technology intends to do is reward the user from time to time, but in a way that is not really logical or rational, right? The pattern has no real logic to it. All the person who's using it knows is that from time to time they're going to be rewarded, and they don't know when that's going to hit. And so that's why they keep jerking the handle, looking for the next hit of dopamine when the reward is going to come through. In the same way, in our digital life, so much of the engagement that we are called into is using exactly the same kind of technology to keep us hooked. It gives us, every once in a while, exactly the thing that we want to see. But it's unpredictable. And so what happens is our brains literally know that the reward is out there. And it then motivates us to keep trying until we get that dopamine hit again. Every rewarded response gets a welcome surprise. But then even every unrewarded response feels something like a near miss, right? Like every time they pull on the slot machine and they don't hit, they think, oh, it's just like, I gotta be just about there. It's gotta be coming. And so this unrewarded response, it feels something like a near miss where, this could have been the one. And so we try one more time. And then that one more time begets another one more time, which begets another one more time, and on and on and on it goes. This is why, I don't know if this is a problem that you have, but this is why we constantly check our email. You know how many times I just without even thinking, just check my email on my phone? Why do I do that? I don't know, because maybe something new is going to be there. Maybe something that, I hope I don't miss whatever that thing happens to be. This is why we constantly open our social media applications, wondering, who else liked my post? Did anyone reshare it? Are there any new comments for me to read? Could I possibly go viral with this thing? Anybody remember a time when being viral would have been a bad thing? This is why we're constantly finding ourselves starting down and sucked into the trail of the doom scroll. Before you know it, time, amounting to hours, are wasted and the day is over. And so Jesus here, and what I want for us to take away with us this morning as an introduction to re-looking at our digital life and well-being. Jesus says regarding the thief comes to steal. The objective of the thief is to steal. And I just ask you to think about, what have our digital habits stolen from us? I'll bet we could spend all kinds of time brainstorming an incredible number of things that our digital habits have stolen for us. My guess is we find ourselves today more restless than we would have been prior to the digital onslaught that we experience every day. I imagine sometimes we find ourselves staying up later and sleeping less. Don't raise your hands, but how many of you had to watch one more episode of that series that you were so engrossed in? You couldn't go to bed, right? Because they left you on a cliff. And you knew you were going to get some satisfaction for the way that was making you feel if you just let the next episode run. And all of a sudden it's 1 o'clock in the morning and you got to go to work tomorrow. We miss important moments. The thief steals away important moments that are just stolen from us. Our relationships have eroded because we've given more of ourselves to our screens and to our virtual lives instead of the real people all around us. And the problem isn't that our relationships have gone through some kind of natural process of disintegration. At the very heart of it, those relationships have been stolen away from us. And this word steal has an interesting connotation and semantic range to it. We think of stealing a lot of times as something like, when a person, runs and snatches away a purse from a woman that wasn't paying attention and runs off with it and they've stolen that purse. But this can be the kind of stealing that is done deceitfully, like when somebody embezzles something. This word to steal can have something to do with stealing from somebody in such a sly and underhanded way that the owner doesn't even know it's gone. And doesn't that so well describe our actual state of affairs today? The reality that something has been stolen away from us, and many of us, except for perhaps having the opportunity to start thinking about it in a service like this, we don't even realize or we don't even recognize yet what we've actually lost. He says, secondly, the thief comes to kill. The thief comes to kill. You know, computers were invented. They were designed as a tool to make our lives easier, were they not? Our smartphones, as soon as we got them, they opened up a whole new world to us. Like the world is entirely different globally because of how broad is the use of the smartphone. But let me ask you, since the invention of the smartphone, are we more or less anxious generally? With the idea that the computer was supposed to make our lives easier, that the smartphone was supposed to help us, has our individual and collective self-esteem, has it increased or decreased? Do we feel better about ourselves because of what the digital world has made available to us, or do we feel worse about ourselves? Are we on the whole, are we more or are we less depressed? Have we made it easier or have we made it more difficult for people to become complete narcissists? Is suicide and suicidal ideation, is it more or is it less of a problem than it was before the global digital world was made available to us? The thief comes to kill. And then finally, the thief comes to destroy. The thief comes to destroy. The idea behind this word is of being destroyed in the sense of losing oneself and losing oneself forever, like disappearing. That what the enemy is looking to do, what this thief who comes in by some other way intends for us is to destroy. And I wonder, on the whole, has there been a net positive result to our soul and to our soul's well-being? Or has it been negative? The thief comes to steal and kill and destroy. Jesus says, I came so that you can have life. And so what this series is going to be all about is how Jesus wants to reintroduce life, how he wants to breathe life back into us. And not just life. He says, I want you to have life in abundance. I want you to have life to the full and overflowing. And the digital world has tricked us. It has made us think that what we are in fact experiencing is more of life than we could ever possibly have imagined. I mean, think about the access to things that we never had access to before. Think of the places that we can go that we could never have gone to before. But the reality is, and I think that you would probably, if you just think about it, find it's very, very true. It has done far more to steal and kill and destroy than it has done to do what Jesus wants to do, which is to bring life. And so here's what we're going to do. I'm inviting our church to do and to participate in a digital fast for 28 days. We're going to have the official start of the digital fast church-wide on November 25th. That's next Monday, not tomorrow, but the next Monday. And 28 days brings us to the start of our Christmas Eve services. What's really interesting is, so next week we'll have a workbook that will be made available that'll kind of serve as a daily guide for all of us who are participating in that. We have 125 that are coming. This is a brand new thing. There's a platform inviting churches and followers of Jesus to participate in a digital fast nationally. And that digital fast launches for the new year. And then it launches again for the season of Lent. Curtis Lake Church is going to be the one and the first church to do this digital fast in 2024. In fact, the 125 copies of the workbook that we're getting are literally fresh, hot off the press. They were delivered to the people who wrote them, and they've given from that pre-shipment a little bit of they had 250, and we snagged 125 of them. So we're going to be right on the cutting edge of this thing. We're the guinea pigs, if you will, for working through this digital fast. Let me just share, fasting isn't done. Maybe you're familiar with like the idea or the concept of fasting from food. Fasting isn't done for the purpose of changing how God treats us or what God will or will not do in our lives. But rather, the purpose of fasting is to change how we come to Him. The goal of this whole thing is not so that we walk away eliminating our use of digital technology, right? Just like if you were fasting from food, the point of that fast is not so that you never eat again. We understand that digital technology is a permanent feature, a permanent encumbrance of all of our lives. But what we do want is we want to change our relationship to that digital technology. I think that as a result of our participating in this, we are going to find ourselves seeing improvements in our relationship with others. And I think we're going to see an increase in our capacity to be hungry for God and what God wants for our lives, and our ability to find the contentment in Him that our souls are so hungry for. Jesus again says, I came to bring life and life in abundance. When it comes to the digital fast itself, not one size fits all. The way people are going to participate in this can vary depending on, first of all, their present life circumstances. And it's also going to vary depending on how much you want to do, like how much of this thing you want to bite off. This past week, I was talking to one person who started a pre-fast digital fast. She's like, listen, I'm so screwed up when it comes to my digital life that I need a head start. And so she's already starting to kind of make steps toward what it will look like to fast in the digital space. Some of the key components, though, just to give you a heads up, and we'll have all the information available for you that you're going to need, but the key components are going to do things like, this is a smartphone, right? We all need our smartphones, but we don't actually need our smartphones to be smart. So we're going to learn what it means to make our smartphones dumb, to remove all of the apps that serve as distractions to us while still maintaining the ability to use the apps that have utility for us. There's going to be an encouragement to pause your digital subscriptions and to either just stop watching screens, maybe for 28 days, or at least to be very, very intentional about what, when, and how long you are watching for. There'll be an encouragement to pause your social media engagement if that's something you can do. And again, the purpose for all of this is to help us refine the boundaries that we need in our lives to protect us, especially for a lot of us, the boundaries between our work life and our life. So this digital fast, again, will start a week from tomorrow, next Monday. And I want to encourage, I hope we see practically everybody, young and old, participating in this thing. I think it'll be a great thing for our church. Amen.